They say the desert keeps its secrets well, too well. Beneath the vast, empty sands of southern Arabia, something ancient sleeps, a city spoken of in half-remembered tale, cursed in scripture and erased from history. Welcome, traveler, to the Rub al Khali, the empty quarter. A sea of golden silence stretching farther than the eye can bear. No rivers, no trees. Only dunes, shifting with the breath of time. It is here, in one of the most inhospitable corners of the earth, that whispers speak of a lost city. A city that rose in splendor, defied the heavens, and vanished almost overnight. They called it Ubar. Others named it Iram of the Pillars, a place so proud it dared to rival the gods. For centuries, Bedouin nomads avoided this region, claiming travelers who dared cross it were swallowed by the earth itself. No wreckage, no bones, just silence, and yet there are traces. Long, straight lines in the sand, barely visible from the ground, but etched clear from the sky. Paths carved by countless feet and hooves, converging toward one forbidden point. A place modern science once dismissed, until a NASA satellite found something that shouldn't be there. In this episode, we'll journey through ancient legends, lost maps, space-age discoveries, and the chilling question that still lingers: if Ubar was truly found, why has no one dared dig deeper? But before the satellites and scholars, before the headlines and ruins, there were stories. Whispers pass from caravan to caravan, from fireside poets to frightened children. Tale of a city of unimaginable wealth, hidden beneath the dunes, guarded by a curse older than time. So sit back, let the sands unfold before you. You won't need to dig, just listen. Tonight, we begin not with proof, but with myth. And like all the best myths, this one refused to die. Soft ambient hum, as if ancient wind stirs across stone pillars. In the 1st century, Roman geographers wrote of a city far beyond Petra, a place where incense flowed like rivers and towers reached toward the sun. Arab texts spoke of a kingdom called Iram al-Imd, Iram of the Pillars, whose people defied divine warnings and paid a terrible price. The Quran itself references this city, casting it among the damned. For over 1,000 years, it was little more than myth, a cautionary tale, a bedtime ghost for desert children, and yet, generation after generation, someone would claim they'd seen something, an entrance in the sand, a structure too old to name, a flash of white stone beneath a collapsed dune. No one believed them. Not really. Until the 1990s, when technology meant to scan the stars turned its eyes downward, and the ghost of Ubar stirred once again. So what is Ubar, really? Was it a thriving hub of the ancient frankincense trade, the Saudi Petra? Or was it something far older, something we still can't explain? What you're about to hear isn't just history. It's archaeology, religion, myth, and science all tangled in dust. And beneath all of it, one question still echoes through the sands. Did we really find Ubar? Or did we just find the edge of something much older? Low ambient hum continues with faint percussion like a heartbeat beneath sand. Long before maps and satellites, before archaeologists sifted through broken ruins, there were stories. Stories told in the flickering glow of oil lamps. Stories carried across generations, whispered across tents and trade routes. In the hearts of Bedouins and scholars alike, one name shimmered with equal parts awe and fear: Ubar, or as it was written in the Quran, Iram, the city of pillars. The name appears only once in a single verse, and yet it has echoed through centuries. Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with Day, the people of Iram, of lofty pillars, the like of whom was never created in the lands? The people of Dai, it is said, were gifted with strength, wealth, and unmatched splendor. Iram was their crowning jewel, a city adorned with towering columns that seemed to scrape the heavens. Its gates were made of bronze, its streets paved in stone, its palaces glittered with gold and incense. But for all their power, the people of Iram grew arrogant. They worshipped idols. They mocked the prophets. They defied the divine. And so, as the legend goes, God struck them down, not in battle, not with plague or sword, but with wind. A violent, endless storm that howled for 7 nights and 8 days, leveling their temples, toppling their pillars, and finally burying their city beneath the sand. The desert, it seemed, was the executioner, and the sand, its grave. Was it a warning, a metaphor, or something real? Over time, the tale of Ubar twisted like a desert mirage, both sacred and speculative. To many Muslims, the fall of Iram is proof of divine justice, a cautionary tale of pride before ruin. To explorers and historians, it became something else entirely. A lost city, a forbidden oasis, Arabia's own Atlantis. And like Atlantis, Ubar began to attract dreamers. In the 1st century CE, Ramang and Greek historians whispered of a land beyond the known world, where spice and perfume flowed like water, a city of brass, some called it. Others referred to it as the Atlantis of the sands. In time, stories merged. Iram became Ubar. Ubar became myth. Maps were drawn with vague marks. Here be ruins. City of the Lost. Forbidden Quarter. By the Middle Ages, Arab geographers like Al-Hamdani and Al-Idrisi described a trade network winding through southern Arabia, one that connected frankincense caravans from Oman to the Mediterranean. Somewhere along those routes, they claimed Ubar once stood, but none had seen it. Not truly. And those who tried to find it often didn't return. Some said Ubar was protected, others cursed. The sands, they believed, had a will of their own. Even Ibn Battuta, the great 14th century traveler, avoided parts of the empty quarter. In his journals, he writes of places forbidden by God, lands where compasses fail, and the sky grows quiet. Time passed. The world moved on. Empires rose, ships sailed, cities were built, and Ubar faded into legend until whispers returned. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Western explorers entered Arabia with new tools, new ideas, and the same old dream, to find the lost city beneath the sand. They pored over maps, studied desert wind patterns, and followed half-erased trade routes. Some found nothing but heat stroke, others broken pottery. A few found strange sinkholes, deep, dark, and lined with stone. And yet, the full city never emerged, until the skies themselves began to speak. Cue subtle shift in ambient tone, a quiet pulse, like radar or data beeping faintly in the background. In the next chapter, we'll leave behind the myth and enter the world of satellites, space radar, and an expedition funded not by kings or sultans, but by NASA, because, as strange as it sounds, it took a machine orbiting Earth to spot what thousands of humans for thousands of years had walked past: the path to Ubar. They call it the Rub al Khali, the empty quarter. But don't be fooled by the name. This desert is anything but empty. It breathes, it shifts, it consumes. Covering over 650,000 square kilometers, the Rub al Khali is the largest uninterrupted sea of sand on Earth. Spanning across Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen, it's more than just dry land. It's a place where the Earth seems to forget you exist. A place where sound disappears into the dunes, and your own footsteps feel like they never happened. There are no rivers, no oases, not even skeletons survive for long. Anything that enters vanishes slowly, silently, like Ubar. Even modern explorers speak of the empty quarter in hushed awe, as if it is not just a place, but a presence. Blazing heat by day, near freezing cold by night. Wing-carved dunes that rise and fall like ocean waves. Some tower over 800 feet high. Entire caravans have been swallowed by them, erased without trace. There are no roads, no trail markers. Just endless, undulating gold, shifting beneath your boots and your mind. And here's the strangest part. The Rub al Khali wasn't always this way. Long ago, thousands of years ago, this desert was alive. Satellite scans and ancient pollen records show that the region once hosted savannas, lakes, and even flowing rivers. Tribes farmed, herds grazed, people built homes from mud brick and stone. Some archaeologists believe it was during this brief green window, 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, that cities like Ubar thrived. But then the climate shifted, the monsoons changed, the rain stopped, and the sands came in. What makes the empty quarter so terrifying isn't just its size, it's its appetite. Over the centuries, entire sinkholes have opened beneath unsuspecting travelers. These collapsed craters appear like the earth sighing and swallowing. Nomads speak of strange noises beneath the sand, places where camels refuse to walk, regions where compasses spin or electronics fail. Superstitions? Maybe. But then again, even NASA's satellite scans would later reveal bizarre, unnatural formations, huge symmetrical depressions hidden beneath the dunes. Some are big enough to hold a fortress, others a city. And one of them, one very specific one, is where Ubar may still lie. But before we get there, let's step into the mind of those who first tried. In the early 20th century, British explorer Bertram Thomas attempted the impossible, a full crossing of the Rub al Khali, armed with camels, local guides, and stubbornness. He became the first Westerner to do so, barely. He wrote of shimmering illusions, confusing mirages, and days without progress. The dunes seemed to move behind his back. Landmarks disappeared, navigation became a cruel joke. But most haunting of all were the stories his Bedouin guides told by firelight. They spoke of a city long cursed, a place where the sand itself was alive, restless, shifting, covering anything it disliked. They never named it directly, but Thomas believed they were speaking of Ubar. Fast forward a few decades, and another explorer took the bait. Wilfred Thesiger, traveling in the 1940s, endured near-death crossings of the desert just to chase those whispers. He collected legends, mapped ruins, and listened. Always listening. But Ubar, still silent. The desert offered him nothing, except miles of golden indifference. And so for years, Ubar remained where it always had, just out of reach. Always one dune too far, one mirage too late. Until something happened that no one expected. A satellite launched not to find ancient cities, but to study the geology of Earth, captured a faint trace, a line, then another. Then a web. Camel tracks? Ancient trade routes? No, something older, wider. Packed paths converging on a central point in the middle of nowhere. The Rub al Khali had been hiding it all along. In the desert, it had finally made a mistake. In the next chapter, we follow the unlikely dream team, a NASA scientist, a rugged explorer, and a sheik with a childhood story who used space-age technology to step where myth had only wandered, right to the edge of Ubar's forgotten gates. January 1992. The modern world was racing into the future, email, satellites, the early rise of the internet. And yet, in the heart of Arabia, something ancient was about to be uncovered using the very latest technology. This was no Indiana Jones fantasy. This was real, and it began with a photograph. Dr. Ramblom, a geologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, wasn't looking for a lost city. He was analyzing data from a satellite system called Circe-Gaxar, advanced radar that could peer beneath desert sands and jungle canopy. A few years earlier, NASA had tested this technology in Egypt, where it revealed ancient riverbeds invisible to the naked eye. It worked spectacularly. So when author and adventurer Nicholas Klopp approached NASA with a wild idea to use satellite imaging to search for the lost city of Ubar, Blom didn't laugh. He leaned in. Klopp wasn't a typical explorer. He was a documentary filmmaker, part historian, part romantic. He'd read Wilfred Thesiger, Bertram Thomas, and Islamic sources describing Iram of the Pillars. What if he thought the city of brass wasn't a metaphor? What if it was buried under real, measurable sand? Using NASA radar, Blom scanned the Rub al Khali, the empty quarter. The data came back like echoes from a dream. Faint lines, intersections, these weren't roads. They were ancient caravan trails, the fossilized paths of thousands of camels carrying frankincense across Arabia, etched into the desert floor thousands of years ago. The paths led in all directions, but many of them converged on a single point, a dark spot near the village of Shisr in southwestern Oman. At first glance, Shisr was just a lonely outpost, a few stone ruins, a well. But under radar, the story changed. The site sat atop a limestone dome, riddled with underground cavities, the kind that collapse into massive sinkholes. Exactly the kind of terrain described in oral legends. Even more intriguing, a fortified structure, half buried, rose up from the earth. Its design was unique, walls arranged in an octagonal pattern with massive corner towers. Clapp and Blom knew what they had. They booked the flight. The expedition to Shisr, arriving with archaeologist Zarins, local officials, and Omani support, the team began to dig, not just metaphorically, literally. Their work uncovered pottery, artifacts, and most crucially, the remains of a fortified city center that had suffered catastrophic structural collapse. One entire section had dropped into a massive limestone cavern, as if the earth had simply opened its mouth and swallowed it whole, just like the legends. But was this really Ubar? Zarins and Clapp treaded carefully. There was no stone sign reading "Welcome to Iram," but everything added up. Location matched early Islamic and classical sources. Caravan routes aligned with the frankincense trade of antiquity. Radiocarbon dating suggested occupation as early as 2800 BCE. The catastrophic collapse echoed both geologic possibility and mythic punishment. And then came the local legends. Tribal elders in the area had long called Shisr the site of an ancient cursed city. One story claimed the well at Shisr had no bottom. Another spoke of lights flickering in the dunes at night, ghostly remnants of a lost civilization. As the excavation deepened, a clearer picture emerged. Ubar had likely been a fortified outpost, a hub along the incense trail, where desert caravans gathered and traded. Not a vast metropolis, but a critical node in a network that fueled the ancient world's appetite for frankincense and myrrh. Over time, Ubar grew rich, arrogant, independent, and then something gave way. The roof of the limestone dome collapsed, swallowing much of the structure. The rest was left to the mercy of sand and time. The Atlantis of the sands had been found, or at the very least, its bones. Aftermath and debate. News of the discovery exploded in 1992. Media around the world hailed it as one of archaeology's greatest finds. Lost city of Ubar found with NASA satellite. Blared headlines. But as always, skeptics followed. Some scholars argued that Shisr was simply a known outpost and that the scale of Ubar had been exaggerated. Others doubted the direct connection to Iram of the Quran. But Clapp, Zarins, and many in the scientific and historical community stood by their work, not because it answered everything, but because it gave us something real, something that bridged the gap between myth and map. Today, the ruins of Shisr have been partially preserved. The collapsed cavern is still there, dark, silent, and vast. Tourists arrive, but not many. The desert hasn't given up all its secrets, and perhaps it never will, because Ubar, like Atlantis or El Dorado, is more than a place. It's an idea, a warning, a question buried in sand. What if the greatest cities we've lost didn't just vanish? What if they were taken? Before there were coins or banks or oil fields, there was frankincense, a pale, amber resin harvested by slicing the bark of boswellia trees. When burned, it released a sweet, haunting smoke, one that drifted through temples, tombs, palaces, and dreams. It was not just a perfume. It was sacred. It was power. The boswellia tree grows in harsh, rocky soil, clinging to cliffs and desert wadis in southern Oman, Yemen, and the Horn of Africa. It's stubborn, scrub-like, easy to overlook, but when its bark is cut, it bleeds, slow, sticky tears of golden resin. And that resin, when dried, became one of the most sought-after substances in the ancient world. Frankincense didn't just smell beautiful. It was believed to purify air, repel demons, heal wounds, and carry prayers to the gods. Burn it, and the smoke would rise, a visible offering to the divine. From the temples of Babylon to the pyramids of Egypt, frankincense burned on altars morning and night. It was poured out in great clouds during religious rituals, funerals, and royal coronations. The Bible speaks of it as one of the gifts brought by the Magi to the infant Christ, along with gold and myrrh. In ancient Israel, only the high priests could enter the inner sanctum of the temple, and always with frankincense smoke around them. Egyptians buried their dead with it, believing the soul needed fragrant guidance into the afterlife. And in the Greco-Roman world, no major ceremony, civic or spiritual, was complete without it. By the first millennium BCE, the trade in frankincense rivaled even that of precious metals. It became a foundation of wealth for ancient South Arabia, what is now Oman, Yemen, and parts of Saudi Arabia. Massive trade routes stretched across the desert, the legendary incense routes. Camel caravans would carry the dried resin north, moving by moonlight to avoid the brutal heat. They'd pass through fortified way stations, watering holes like Ubar, where goods were taxed, stored, or traded. These outposts grew rich, their leaders powerful, and those who controlled the incense trade controlled the spiritual economy of the ancient world. Historians believe that the ancient kingdom of Ad, possibly tied to Ubar, flourished because of frankincense. They didn't need vast armies. They had what everyone else wanted, divine access. They could burn their wealth and still grow richer, but like all golden ages, it came with a cost. The demand for frankincense pushed harvesters deeper into dangerous terrain. Forests were overtapped, soil eroded. Caravans grew longer and more vulnerable. Bandits emerged. Rival tribes fought over access. Some rulers tried to hoard the resin, banning its export. Others turned their cities into fortresses. And as always, when wealth accumulates, so does pride. Or as ancient legends would have it, arrogance. In the Quran, the people of Iram, often associated with Ubar, are condemned for their pride and extravagance. They're described as having pillars the like of which were not created in the land, but they turned away from righteousness. So says the text, they were punished with a terrible windstorm and buried beneath the sands. Was this a metaphor? Or did a real catastrophe strike a city built on incense and Edo? Back at the ruins of Shisr, archaeologists found evidence of a massive sinkhole collapse, enough to destroy a small city or a fortified settlement. What if the earth didn't just give out, but was perceived as divine retribution? To the desert people who saw the world as a living, breathing spirit, A city that fell into the ground wasn't just unlucky, it was judged. And Ubar, once rich from burning resin, had burned too brightly. Smoke in memory today, frankincense is still harvested in Oman, still burned in rituals, still prized for its scent. But its golden age is long gone. Now, only the ghosts remember the time when a tree's sap moved empires and fed a city that dared to rival the gods. When you burn frankincense today, its smoke curls and climbs, just as it did 4,000 years ago. And somewhere, in that sweet scent, perhaps Ubar still whispers, "Have you not seen how your lord dealt with Iram of the pillars, the like of which was never made in any land?" Before archaeologists brushed the dust from Ubar's crumbling walls, before satellites traced forgotten roads in the sand, the name Iram already stirred unease, not among scientists, but in the hearts of poets, prophets, and travelers who spoke in riddles and reverence. In ancient Arabia, history was never written in stone. It was carried by voice, passed down across generations through oral poetry, songs, and stories told under the stars. Many of these verses spoke of a place called Iram, a city of soaring pillars, immense wealth, and strange arrogance. Sometimes it was a paradise, other times a warning. The Bedouin would say, "Beware the city that reached too high," for the wind remembers. The Quran's warning of all references to this mysterious city, none are as haunting or as explicit as the verses in Surah Al-Fajr. Here, Iram is not a myth, but a civilization judged. The people of Day, powerful and proud, are said to have defied divine guidance. Their capital, Iram of the Pillars, was described as unique, unmatched in structure and splendor. Who built tall structures in every open field in vain pursuit of greatness. But that greatness, the scripture says, turned to vanity and then to ruin. The Quran tells us they were struck by a mighty wind, not for a moment, but for 7 nights and 8 days, relentless, without rest. It's a poetic image, a once proud city reduced to sand by the very air they breathed. No monuments, no graves, just empty dunes and silence. The pre-Islamic poets. Long before Islam, Arabian poets composed odes and laments referencing Iram, not just as a place, but as a symbol. It was the archetype of lost splendor, the vanished Eden of their ancestors. Their verses mourned cities swallowed by arrogance, where stone became sand and memory faded into wind. Where now is Iram? Where are her towers? Gone like dew on a hot morning. To these poets, Iram wasn't entirely gone. It was just hiding, buried beneath the dunes, waiting for the foolish to uncover it. Again, outside Arabia, Greek and Roman whispers even beyond Arabia's borders. Echoes of Iram and Ubar drifted into the texts of foreign travelers. The Greek historian Ptolemy, in the 2nd century CE, marked on his maps a city called Oman, Emporium, or Ioberite, placed suspiciously close to where Ubar would one day be rediscovered. Roman merchants spoke of a hidden city deep in the sands, where incense flowed like rivers and gold hung from doorways. They never reached it, or if they did, they never returned. One Roman text, Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, mentions a Mur coast with a capital lost inland, known only to camel drivers and sun priests. Again and again, we find the same outline, a city rich beyond reason, hidden, punished, lost. Centuries later, Islamic historians like al-Masudi and Ibn Khaldun referenced Ubar, though carefully, almost skeptically. They quoted earlier sources, adding their own interpretations. One tale describes a man who stumbled upon the city's gates during a sandstorm. He entered, Inside, he found towering palaces, fountains of stone, but no people, just silence. He tried to leave and was never seen again. Another account from Al-Hamadani tells of spirits guarding the ruins, and how only a fool would attempt to disturb what was buried by divine will. So what are we to make of this? Is Iram or Ubar just a composite legend stitched from poetry and myth? Or did something real inspire centuries of fear and fascination? The verses don't say how big the city was. They don't tell us how it was built or when it fell. They don't need to, because to the people who carried these stories, Ubar wasn't a point on a map. It was a warning carved in memory. A parable about the price of pride. A city so magnificent, even God took notice, and then took it back. What the ancients believed to modern minds, it's tempting to separate legend from fact. But to those who first spoke of Iram, the line didn't exist. History was never just a record of what happened. It was a mirror, a living thing. And Ubar's reflection still glimmers in the heat haze of the empty quarter. You can't see it on every map, but it's there in the sacred verses, in the half-erased scrolls, in the dreams of poets who saw towers rising from dunes and falling just as fast. Perhaps to truly understand Ubar, we must stop looking at the sand and start listening to the silence between stories. Sometimes what is lost beneath the earth is first seen from the sky. For centuries, Ubar lived only in stories, a name spoken with caution, a warning buried in scripture, a legend that seemed destined to remain just that legend, until a new set of eyes appeared above the earth, not human eyes, but lenses, satellites orbiting silently overhead, snapping thousands of photographs of desert landscapes no one had touched in millennia. And in one of those photographs, a pattern emerged, a trail, a faint whisper of a road, a path too ancient to name, too deliberate to ignore. In the late 1980s, NASA was conducting satellite imaging of the Arabian Peninsula, primarily for environmental and geographical mapping. But tucked away in the data, something strange appeared. Scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory noticed faint linear traces running across the sand. These weren't random cracks or natural formations. They resembled ancient caravan routes. These ghostly trails converged, all leading to a single point in the heart of the empty quarter. A location untouched by cities, unreachable by modern roads. And yet, according to the satellites, a place of extraordinary human activity long ago. Enter Nicholas Clapp, the filmmaker who found a lost city. The story of Ubar's modern rediscovery begins, surprisingly, not with an archaeologist, but with a documentary filmmaker and amateur archaeologist named Nicholas Clapp. Clapp was fascinated by the legend of Ubar. He believed the stories weren't just folklore, but distorted memories of a real place. So when he came across the Ptolemaic maps of ancient Arabia and noticed a city labeled Iobarite in the desert, he asked a bold question: what if this city still exists? Hidden under sand? He approached NASA, and together with Ronald Baum at JPL, they began analyzing Landsat and shuttle imaging radar data. And there, in the process radar images, were the same caravan trails. Ancient roads used for the frankincense trade, now invisible to the naked eye, but alive in radar echoes. And those trails? They all pointed to a location near a small Omani settlement named Shisr in 1992. A joint team of explorers, archaeologists, and local authorities launched an expedition to Shisr. At first glance, the site looked ordinary: a collapsed limestone sinkhole, a scattering of stones, and a few ancient ruins. But when they began digging, they unearthed the remains of an 8-towered fortress, built atop a massive underground limestone cavern, likely the very water source that made the settlement a critical stop along the trade routes. More importantly, the location matched the coordinates from the satellite analysis, exactly where the caravan trails met. Fragments of pottery, incense burners, ancient walls. Layer by layer, the evidence piled up. A once thriving outpost in the middle of nowhere, a keynote in the ancient frankincense trade, and possibly the legendary Ubar. What gave the site an eerie twist wasn't just the ruins, it was the sinkhole itself. Local Bedouins had long avoided the area, whispering that a once proud city had been swallowed by the earth as punishment for its arrogance. Now, archaeologists were staring directly into that abyss. The sinkhole beneath Shisr was enormous, capable of consuming entire structures. And over time, much of the fort above had collapsed into it. Could this have inspired the legend? A city swallowed in a single night, not by wind but by the earth itself. To believers, the metaphor was clear. Whether wind or stone, Ubar had fallen and vanished beneath God's judgment. Science meets myth. What makes Ubar's rediscovery so haunting is that it blurs the line between truth and myth. We have physical ruins at Shisr caravan roads identified by satellite, textual references from the Quran and Persian poetry, and a collapsed fort matching the punishment narrative. Is Shisr definitively Ubar? Some scholars hesitate. They argue it was a trade outpost, not a city of legends. But others, including the Omani government, embrace it as the best candidate we've ever found. And the satellite discovery? It revolutionized archaeology, proving that what lies beneath the desert can be traced from above. It was the first time a city was rediscovered from space. The case of Ubar marked a turning point, not just for historians, but for technology. Where once we relied on legends and chance excavations, now we had satellites, radar imaging, and AI-enhanced mapping. What other forgotten cities lie buried under our feet? How many more Ubers are waiting, silent, invisible, until the right lens looks down from orbit? Perhaps Ubar is just the beginning. Sometimes the truth isn't found by digging into the ground, but by looking up and listening to the whispers the earth still sends skyward. Long before gold became the world's obsession, there was another treasure, white, fragrant, sacred, and worth more ounce for ounce than silver. It came from the trees of the southern Arabian valleys, and it traveled thousands of miles by camel and caravan through deserts, kingdoms, and temples. And at the heart of that ancient trade stood Ubar, the scent that ruled empires, frankincense. To the modern world, it's a perfume, a holiday scent, a relic of old rituals. But 2,000 years ago, it was everything. This pale golden resin, blood from the boswellia tree, was burned in temples from Egypt to Babylon. Its smoke was believed to carry prayers to the gods. It was a gateway between the mortal and the divine. Doctors swore by its healing power. Kings hoarded it as tribute, and priests demanded it for every ceremony. In some regions, a pound of frankincense was worth its weight in gold. And where did this holy treasure come from? Southern Arabia, specifically modern-day Oman and Yemen, was one of its richest sources. And to move it across deserts and empires, you needed a city of trade, a stronghold in the sand, a gate between the trees of the south and the empires of the north. You needed Ubar, the frankincense road, arteries of the desert. The frankincense road wasn't a single road, it was a network. From the Dhofar region near the coast, caravans loaded with frankincense began their journey northward. Thousands of camels, each bearing tightly packed bundles of the resin, walked in long columns across blistering dunes. The desert was not kind, but trade was life, and cities like Ubar became vital checkpoints. At Ubar, merchants rested. Camels were watered. Deals were struck. Spices, incense, and gold exchanged hands beneath palm leaf tents and sun-baked towers. This was a city built not of stone, but of commerce and belief. Every year, hundreds, perhaps thousands, passed through it. Pilgrims, priests, traders, spies. Everyone needed frankincense, and Ubar controlled the flow. Wealth that glimmered and corrupted, it's easy to romanticize ancient trade. But wealth, especially sacred wealth, has its own dangers. Uber's control over the incense roots made it powerful beyond measure. Its rulers, known as the D people in some legends, were said to be giants in strength and pride. They built towering pillars, adorned their halls with gold and ivory, and claimed they were blessed above all others. But over time, something changed. The city that once honored the divine began to worship itself. The incense meant for gods now filled their palaces. Ritual became excess. Piety became pride. In the Qur'anic telling, they turned away from humility, and so their city was destroyed. Whether by divine punishment or geological collapse, the sinkhole at Shisr swallowed a city that had once grown fat on sacred smoke. Temples, thrones, and smoke. Follow the frankincense road far enough north, and you reach Jerusalem, Babylon, and Rome. In every one of these cities, Uber's exports burned, curling into the rafters of temples, coating altars in scent. Frankincense was used in the rituals of ancient Judaism and Christianity, Egyptian mummification, Roman imperial ceremonies, Babylonian temple rites, and anointed kings. It healed wounds. It was offered to newborn gods like the gift of the Magi to the infant Jesus, but few who inhaled its perfume ever knew where it came from. The deserts, the caravans, and the city in the sand, Uber, the fall of the road. So what happened? Several forces over centuries led to Uber's decline, changes in trade routes. As maritime trade grew, camel routes became less vital. Ships could carry more, faster, and cheaper. Religious shifts. As monotheistic faith spread, incense lost its role in sacrificial rituals. Demand fell. Priests burned less. Environmental strain. Overuse of water sources, like the one beneath Shisr, may have weakened the foundations of cities along the route. Pride. If the stories are true, arrogance sealed Uber's fate. By the time Islamic travelers began writing down their journeys, Uber was already a ghost. Smoke that still whispers, and yet, walk through the Jofar Mountains today. You'll still see boswellia trees, their bark scarred from centuries of harvest. You'll smell the sweet, citrus-like scent of frankincense rising in the heat, just as it did 1,000 years ago, just as it did when camels rested in Uber's shadow. Trade may have shifted, the city may be gone, but the smoke still rises. And in it, if you breathe deep enough, you might hear the whispers of a vanished city. It was incense that connected gods and men, and it was incense that built a city from sand and reduced it to legend. When the ruins at Shisr were unearthed in the early 1990s, many were quick to declare it. Uber had been found. The fabled Atlantis of the sands, long whispered in legends, now had a location on the map. The excitement was electric. Headlines around the world proclaimed the mystery solved. But as the dust of discovery settled, a quieter, more complicated conversation began. Scholars, archaeologists, and historians stepped in with a crucial question. Was Shisr truly Uber, or simply part of a much larger story? The fortress discovered at Shisr was undeniably ancient, with architectural features that hinted at significance, 8 defensive towers, deep underground chambers, and signs of long-term habitation. Pottery shards, incense burners, and trade goods were found scattered across the site, pointing to a rich past tied to the frankincense trade that once connected southern Arabia to the empires of Rome, Persia, and beyond. But was it a city? That's where the debate begins. Some argue that Shisr was not the grand, thriving metropolis described in legends and ancient texts, but rather a fortified caravanserai, a rest stop for traders moving through the vast desert. A place of strategic importance, yes, but not a capital, not a myth. Others believe that Ubar was never a single city at all, but a broader region, a network of settlements and trade hubs linked together, like pearls on a desert strand. In that view, Shisr is not the entire story, but a vital piece of the puzzle. A window into something far older, far more complex. The challenge lies in time itself. The deeper archaeologists dig, the more layers they uncover, evidence of different civilizations occupying the site across centuries. The deeper they go, the blurrier the lines become between legend and reality. There are those who suggest that the story of Ubar is more symbolic than literal, a tale of lost wisdom, arrogance, or divine punishment, passed down through scripture and story to warn future generations. To them, Shisr is a physical anchor to a myth meant to echo beyond geography. Yet, despite the skepticism, the dream persists. Every new find, a carved stone, a collapsed wall, a forgotten inscription, keeps the fire alive. The mystery of Ubar refuses to be pinned down by a single narrative. It lives in tension, between science and story, between fact and faith, between what we know and what we still hope to find. The scholars continue to debate, the sands continue to shift, and beneath it all, Ubar waits, either as a buried city or a buried truth, reminding us that the past is never finished. It is questioned, revised, rediscovered, and sometimes it remains just out of reach. Beneath the golden dunes of the Rub al Khali, beneath the heat and silence that stretches for miles in every direction, lies something no one has fully touched. Something not yet understood. The sands have shifted for centuries, revealing fragments and then swallowing them again. But what they still keep hidden may be the most astonishing of all. Satellite images continue to show strange anomalies, geometric patterns, linear depressions, areas where the ground behaves unlike any other part of the desert. These aren't just tricks of the light, they are scars of something buried. In the years since Shisr's discovery, researchers and explorers have returned, hopeful, cautious. What they've found points to a truth both promising and frustrating. The excavation has barely scratched the surface. Massive sinkholes surround the site, some known, some only suspected. These chasms plunge deep into the earth, their walls jagged, their depths unmeasured. Equipment malfunctions near them. Signals vanish. Some believe these are entrances to chambers that haven to seen light in 1,000 years or more. Subterranean passages, possibly carved by ancient hands, might still lie sealed beneath the collapse. And there are stories, whispered from local Bedouins, passed from one generation to the next. Stories of areas where compasses spin and strange hums rise from the earth at night. Places where travelers have vanished without explanation. It's tempting to dismiss these as desert folklore, but then again, so was Ubar, until radar and stone made it real. There are places around Shisr that no one has dared to dig. Some are protected, some are too unstable. Others remain simply unknown. Technology may one day peel back the sand without disturbing it, revealing the true size and shape of what sleeps below. Until then, we're left with hints. A fragment of a wall, a collapsed archway, the trace of a path that vanishes into nothing. And the question lingers, what else is down there? A city lost not just to sand, but to time itself. Artifacts untouched, bones undisturbed, stories unspoken. The ground beneath Shisr might hold clues not just to Ubar, but to a forgotten network of civilizations, traders, priests, kings, all erased by sun and wind and silence. Until we look deeper, Ubar is both found and unfound, named but still mysterious, known yet unknowable. The sand does not give up its secrets easily, but they are there, waiting, and sometimes, if you listen closely, you can almost hear them breathing. The Atlantis of Arabia. That's what Western explorers and journalists called Ubar, a lost city swallowed by the sands. The name was seductive, mysterious, familiar. But unlike Plato's Atlantis, which many believe was pure allegory, Ubar may have had a firmer foundation beneath its myths. For centuries, fragments of Ubar appeared scattered across time and cultures. In Islamic texts, it was known as Iram of the Pillars, the fabled home of the tribe of Day, mentioned in the Quran as a people destroyed by divine punishment. Ancient Greek maps hinted at a mysterious outpost deep in Arabia's heart. Yemeni oral traditions spoke of a city that defied the gods and was buried in a single night. Even medieval Christian travel writings referred to a golden land in the south, now lost. Ubar straddled the line between legend and memory for millennia. It was too persistent to be entirely myth and too elusive to be proven real. Until 1992, when satellite radar from a NASA shuttle traced something unexpected, a faint line across the empty quarters dunes, invisible to the naked eye. That line changed everything. A myth became a map. A whisper became a waypoint. And yet, beneath all the grandeur and mystery, there lies a quieter truth. Ubar may not have been a singular, perfect city. It might have been a layered site where different eras, different peoples, and different dreams collided. Bronze Age settlements, Iron Age traders, early Islamic tribes, each leaving behind traces of their world, built atop what came before. Much like Troy, once dismissed as pure myth, and later unearthed as many cities stacked upon each other, Ubar might be a palimpsest, a city written, erased, and rewritten by time. Each layer tells a different story. A story of survival through harsh desert trade. A story of glory built on incense and conquest. A story of forgetting, of being swallowed by the very sands that once made it rich. And even if Ubar's name is lost in shifting translations, even if Shisr proves to be just a chapter in the larger tale, even if most of its treasures lie deeper than we can currently dig, its spirit survives. It lives on in myth, in satellite anomalies that defy simple explanation, in the restless yearning to believe there's something more, still out there, still hidden, still watching. It echoes in the eerie silence of the desert, in the wind that brushes ancient stone, in the absence of sound where once voices, laughter, music, and the thick scent of incense once curled skyward under 1,000 stars. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, but the stories they leave behind, they echo even when no one is listening.